Today is October the 6th, 2001. We're at the Museum of the 12th Armored Division, opening weekend. I'm Charlie Henson, and I'm with Harold S. Wrenn. Appreciate you staying and waiting for us today. Tell me your full name, when you were born, and where you were born.
My name is Harold Samuel Wrenn. I was born in Richland County, near Columbia, South Carolina, on March the 15th, 1925.
Tell me about your mom and dad and what they did.
My dad was a carpenter and my mother was a housewife.
And what were their names?
My daddy's name was Mike Bryce Wrenn, and my mother's name was Kate Elizabeth Wrenn.
And had they been Carolinians for a long, long time?
They were both born and raised in Chester County, South Carolina, and had about the equivalent of a 4th or 5th grade education.
What about brothers and sisters?
I had one brother older than me. His name is Bryce. He's still living. He had 3 children.
Did he serve in the...
No,
Okay.
no, he did not serve in the service.
Tell me where you were on Pearl Harbor Day, what you remember about that.
It was on a Sunday afternoon, and we were playing touch football out in what you would call a cow pasture, about 4 or 5 of boys, young men. Yeah.
And did they come out and tell you, or did your parents come tell you, or did you just go back to the house?
I really don't remember. Somehow we found out, and of course it was a big question, where's Pearl Harbor? Yeah.
So how old were you that day?
I was 16.
So how does that affect a 16-year-old and how you saw your future?
I didn't think it was any great deal as far as I was concerned. Of course, the fact is that shortly thereafter we knew we were at war, and of course that changed the whole attitude of the country at that time. Of course, my main goal at that time was to finish high school. So I was a senior in high school at that time. So that was my goal, was to get through high school.
So
And
tell me the road to the, were you drafted, enlisted?
yes, ma'am, I was drafted and spent 32 months and a few days and discharged 6 weeks before I was 21 years old.
Okay, you graduated. Okay, did you graduate, and then tell me the road to the service?
I worked about one year at Fort Jackson in the Ordnance Department, which would be the equivalent of a Napa store now, parts store, and was registered for the draft on March 15th, 1943. Took my physical on April the 15th, 43. Was inducted at Fort Jackson. I went to Fort Jackson in the latter part of May and into the service in June. Was at Fort Jackson for about 2 weeks and went AWOL only one time. And was sent to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where I took my basic training. Left Fort Knox, Kentucky, and thought I was going to be a tank commander, because in the maneuvers that we had at the final of the basic training, I was a tank commander, and it's the first time I ever had to sign my name for a lot of money in that old tank that they said was worth $75,000, and I put Harold S. Wrenn on it. And so I made it through that, and with that big W that I have in my name, they started at the top of the alphabet shipping people out, and there was only 5 or 6 of us left. They sent me over to what I would say a replacement depot, and here'd be another group in. I was there about 2 weeks, I guess. About 40 of us was put on a train, and we wound up in Abilene, Texas at Camp Barkley. And the powers to be decided that I was better fitted with a M1 rifle than I was to have anything to do with a tank. So I was sent to the 17th, and I was put in B Company in the 2nd Platoon, 1st Squad.
Tell me about AWOL.
I had to go see who was happened to become my wife.
So you dated and corresponded with her through the whole war?
Well, I went to school with her from the 3rd grade on through high school, and she and I were very much together during our senior year in high school, and she went off to college, and I didn't have enough funds to get to Clemson where I really wanted to go to school, and I had no support from Mother and Daddy because they didn't have the funds, and I worked pretty hard, I guess, since I've tried to take care of myself as far as my clothes, my money, and everything since I was 14 years old.
Tell me the first day of basic training, what it was like walking in there, what they did to you, how you felt about it.
Well, since I had been on Fort Jackson for nearly a year before going into service, I was pretty familiar with what Army was like, and had considerable amount of dealings with troops who were coming to get parts for their vehicles and what have you. In fact, one captain tried to induce me to enlisting because they were going to North Africa, and he wanted somebody in his ordnance department that with my capabilities, and I said, I don't think I'm ready to go to North Africa yet. I'm not 18 years old. So it was no surprise to me. No surprise. No surprise, and I had several meals in the mess halls, and also it's really no surprise.
Who was your first captain?
So you need to give that whole thing over.
Right there. Yeah,
There
there you go.
I don't remember.
Oh, okay. Who is the first person you remember out here at Barclay?
First person that I remember at Barclay was Sergeant Calvin Camp.
Tell me about him.
Well,
Describing what he was like.
he was from Coleman, Alabama. He had enlisted in the Army in 1938 when I think he was 18 years old, and served down in Panama, and in his weight class he was the champion boxer, and he took no thing from anybody, and he had a very, very short fuse. So I realized right quick, like, to say sir nearly to him.
Okay, tell me about your driver's license.
You could get your driver's license when you were 14 in South Carolina at the time, and for reasons that I don't really recall, I finally convinced Daddy when I was 15 that we could get the driver's license, so we went by the highway department, and they closed at 5 o'clock, and we got there right at 5 o'clock, so they couldn't give me the test. So the next day I went to work with Daddy and drove to the highway department, took the test and got my license, and carried the car back to where Daddy was working.
When you got into the Army, what did that driver's license do to you?
I can't tell that story.
You can't tell that story you were telling me?
No.
Oh, okay. He has a real great story about this. Your volunteerism?
Well, I volunteered once.
And you're not going to tell me about that one volunteer?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Okay. Let's get back to Barclay then. I thought I was going to get that on tape. Tell me about your training out there. What did they do to you? How did you experience the hill country?
Well, having just finished 16 weeks at Fort Knox and came here in Barkley, and I got here in Barkley about either the end of October, the 1st of November, and I thought I was in basic training again, and we went through that situation, and then I thought I went through basic training again. And so I was here, we left here on first part of September of 1944, so that's 8 months, and 2 more months is 10, so I think I went through basic training about 3 times.
And you were a rifleman?
That's what they said.
Were you, how did you, in your testing and stuff, how did you do your marksmanship?
I think I had expert, if I recall. I think so. The pecking order in the B Company, or all of the infantry battalions, in the first squad of the rifle platoons, didn't have a buck sergeant as second in command, and it was 11-man squad. The other 2 rifle squads were 12 men, but we had the lieutenant to ride with us, so we were one less, and the assistant squad leader was a PFC, and I wound up as that. So my time in Barkley, from about 2 months after I got here, I was a PFC and was assistant squad leader of the first squad of the 2nd platoon.
What would be your job description being there?
I always thought that I was more or less a flunky, and if it was any dirty work to do, that's what they were looking for you to do. Most of the training, in my opinion, was to get you in as good a physical condition as you could. I think that was one of the major things that they tried to do to us. And, of course, they tried to teach us discipline, of which you had to have. I didn't like it. I resented it. I hated to be told to do anything. But I subjected myself to it, and I learned not to ask questions. It was on a division. One of the last things that we did at Camp Barkley was had war games with another division. I think it was somewhere down near Brownwood, Texas. I believe that's where it was. First thing we did when we got there was dig foxholes. So we get ready to cover them up, and so we go to the maneuvers, and the captain of our company had us in a location where live ammunition was being fired into, and he got relieved on the spot, and we wound up with a 2nd lieutenant as our company commander, and I lived with that gentleman through the war. We had him as a 2nd lieutenant in Barkley for, I guess, about 6 weeks, and then he went back to battalion headquarters, and then I'll get into with him later on. But anyway, when the maneuvers was over, we came back in to the same area, dig foxholes again. We dug them. We just about got them dug, fill them up. We got them filled up. Dig foxholes again, inspection. We dug them out, fill them up. We're not going to have, we're going to have inspection, dig them up again. And so when we got back to Camp Barkley, we're having a critique and with the NCOs, and I, like a stupid guy, said, Lieutenant Ebbage, why do we have to dig those foxholes and cover them up so many times on whatever day it was? And he said, well, that was what we needed to do, and it was for you to follow orders, and so I got to follow orders on KP and guard duty for the next 4 weeks. So I learned not to ask questions after that and not to volunteer.
Tell me about when you realized that you were going to leave Barkley, and what all y'all had to do to get ready to go. Leave Texas.
Well, this thing at Brownwood was the final thing of what I later realized was to see if the powers to be thought the division was ready to go. And of course we were getting our clothes together and guns and all of that. And they put us on a train, and here we took out. Nobody knew where, but we knew we were going east, which I was pleased for that. I wanted to go that way rather than that way. But we wound up at Camp Shanks, New York, and we were there for, I guess, about a week. And the last thing that was handed to me by our Lieutenant Edgren, I think was his name, was a sniper's rifle, and didn't have time to zero it in or anything. And so when we got to Camp Shanks, New York, they gave me a pass. I had a pass to go to New York City, and we were supposed to be able to leave at 4 o'clock, and a quarter to 4 I was told that my pass was no longer good. I had to leave at 5:30 the next morning to go to West Point rifle range to zero in that rifle. I said, well, thank you very much. And so I went to New York City and got back about 3:30 in the morning and changed into the fatigues and got on that old Army truck along with I guess a dozen or more other guys with the same thing with sniper's rifle. Got up there, and at 300 yards I couldn't hit the target. And first lieutenant chewed me out. Says, yeah, he says, you one of the guys that took off and went to New York and came back half stewed. And so there was a sergeant there. He said, let me fire that gun. And handed his binoculars to the captain. And he says, look at the target and see what it's doing. Well, he hit the target to the right, not the one he was aiming. And you couldn't zero the gun in. It was a faulty scope. But the lieutenant didn't apologize for chewing my back end out. I remember that.
How did you feel about the military at this point, at that point?
This is on tape, please.
Okay, never mind. You have perfect right to tell me no. Okay. Okay, as y'all headed across the Atlantic,
We were on the Empress of Australia. I guess you've heard that term before, the Empress of Australia. Beautiful ship. Fed twice a day, potatoes and sausage. That's said enough.
how long did it take you to get across?
I think it was about 14 days. I think it's 14 days, and we landed, supposed to land in Cherbourg, France, and they never opened the port because it was destroyed. So, and we landed at Liverpool, England, and sat out there in the harbor for a day before they put us on a train and carried us to Tidworth barracks where the paratroopers had stayed. And we were in those huts that was wooden and canvas tops. About 10 people could stay in them. And we were there for about 3 weeks. I got to go to London once. And then they took us to Southampton, put us on a ship, crossed the English Channel, and got near the town of Le Havre. And we went over the side of the ship on those nets down into landing crafts in the middle of the night and started out to the beach, and on the beach was floodlights so that we could see how to get in. That's a true story. Somehow I lost my rifle. So I arrived in France without a weapon.
Tell me what it was like. You're heading towards Le Havre. You have to, okay, get your junk and get out on the ship and stuff. Tell me what you as a 18-year-old was thinking and feeling at that point.
Well, I think I don't know how other people felt about it, but I got to the point that basically I wasn't living for tomorrow. I wasn't living for the next hour. I was living for the next minute. And so just whatever came, that was it. There was no real plan to what I going to be doing tomorrow, because most of the time you were being told what to do. And so you just get to the point that, or at least I got to the point that there was not a heck of a lot of initiative on my part of any planning because I didn't have any authority to do so. So I just went along being told what to do.
Was that pretty comfortable for you? Or was that the way to survive?
That's the way to survive. That's the way to survive. Keep your mouth shut. You can do all kind of thoughts about what you would like to say, but you know, I can look at most people and say, you know, you sure are a nice person, and I think you're the biggest SOB in the world, and you'd never know that I was thinking that.
Tell me about Lahore. What was it like stepping on French soil, and here we're going to go?
Well, I didn't see much of it other than what the floodlights were showing because it was dark. And didn't see any of that until after the war was over, when I went back across the English Channel to London and back across, saw a little bit of it then. But we were on a beach, I don't know what, I think it was north of Lahore. Very, as I recall, just a nice sandy beach. And of course the Air Force had complete control over the skies at that time, because this was in late October of 1944, which is after D-Day, 100 and some days, and at that point it was pretty much controlled, and it was certainly no firing or anything like that going on, because the war was far over into France by that time. And I don't know, Harold Wrenn has been a pretty lucky guy, as I already told you, that I missed being sent overseas. Well, and the ABCs, some of them went straight overseas as replacements out of basic training, and I stayed in the States for another 10 months. I guess it was about 10 months. And then when we got into France, the decision was made that we had to move on up, and we got all of our equipment and everything, and believe it or not, we had to put guards on the vehicles for the Ordnance Department of the 12th. They had so much equipment, so much tank tracks and motors and this, that they had to get the Quartermaster Corps to transport part of this stuff, and to be sure the truck would get where we wanted it to go, they had to put a guard on it. Ain't that something? But we did.
Was that the local people, or was that an issue?
U.S. Army people. U.S. Army Quartermaster. True story. True
So
story.
you were protecting the equipment from Americans?
Yes. To keep them from selling it. That was keep them from selling it. A lot of stuff was saleable. A lot of stuff we had was not that way. And so the 2nd Platoon was assigned to the Ordnance Department to help them with guards. And it was a sergeant there, looked over at me one day, he said, how about riding with me? He was the last truck. I rode the last truck from the Lahore area up to the front line of the 12th Armored Division.
What was the ride like? The things you saw?
Well, it wasn't very pleasant. Of course, I got a taste of that in London, because London a lot of that was tore up. So I got a little bit of taste of what it was like. Really did have a little bit of idea what was going on. And then as you were going up, you saw a lot of torn up buildings and a few burned out vehicles and this type thing. And as soon as we got up to where the Ordnance Department had their depot type, we were put on a truck and carried on up to where the company was, and the company was sitting on the line. They had relieved an infantry regiment or something, and so we start up at night again, And of course, I was going to be a soldier. I remember this very well. I had 3 bandoliers over my shoulders, 2 grenades, 10 clips of ammunition in my ammunition belt, 2 extra clips in my field jacket pocket. And so we were walking, had to walk, I guess, 5 or so miles to get up there. And so, Lord, that thing got heavy into the ditch. And here went another one into the ditch. And I learned you can carry too much. And so I finally wound up as lots of us did, that 1 bandolier, a grenade, and your belt of ammunition. And be careful and just don't fire your gun for the heck of it. And so we were up there for 2 nights. And so we were then relieved, and coming back, we came down that same road. And of course, this was in about the middle of December at that time. And there were dead soldiers, Germans on the side, and landmines in the road. And you got the idea then you were really in the war. And it was very cold at that period of time, and we lost a good many people in frostbite. I came close to getting a trip home on it, but didn't. I survived it. So.
Tell me about the men in your company. The men in your company that you started with, your group of 12, 11.
They were a mixed group from various parts of the country. Age-wise, it was 2 or 3 in there that were in their 20s. Sergeant Camp, I think, was about 25. There were 3 ASTP guys in there, which were my age, and we had a couple of other people in the squad. If I may diverse just a little bit, at this period of time, I guess it was 3 years ago, the wife and I flew to Sacramento to meet with the Western chapter meeting. And the reasons for that was there would be 3 guys from that first squad was going to be there. There was going to be 2 guys from the first platoon was going to be there, and Captain Ebbage was going to be there. And so we had a ball, if you can think that his 3 guys, some 55 years or 50-some years later, can come together. And digress a little bit further, we jumped a lot, but I have to tell this because I made the statement yesterday to somebody. It's the most important meeting of the 12th Armored Division of anything I've ever been to, because here were 5 guys and Captain Ebbage. And we were all 5 of us were real young. And the remarkable thing about this is those 5 people took advantage of the GI Bill to get their college education. And out of those 5 guys, there was 2 PhDs, 2s with master's degree, and I was there with my just undergraduate degree. So I thought that it was rather a fantastic thing that here we are, we took advantage of something, and in my opinion, it was one of the greatest things the country ever did. And as far as I'm concerned, the government spent a lot of money, about $10,000 during the time that I went through school. And of course, if you on today's thing, I guess it would be worth at least $100,000 is what it would be. But getting this college education made it possible for me to repay the government many times. Many times. And so I've been rather fortunate in that way. And yeah, I'm on Social Security. We'll get to that later, though.
Tell me about Ebbage. Ebbage?
Ebbage. E-B-B-A-G-E.
Tell me about him, what he was like, those in and out of those days.
Have you ever seen a movie of John Wayne? That's Captain Ebbets.
Was he a tough guy?
Yes, he was.
How did he treat you men?
He treated us like we were dogs. He expected you to snap to attention. He expected you to not question anything, and he did. And in retrospect, he was correct. So don't get me wrong when I talk about him. In retrospect, I've often said he was the biggest SOB when you wasn't fighting, but I would have followed him to hell if we were fighting. He was an excellent company commander. Excellent.
What were the characteristics that made him excellent?
He was just John Wayne. That's the best way I can. The best way I can express it. He was a leader. People are born that way. I mean, you don't acquire it. You either have it or you don't have it, in my opinion. And Captain Ebbets was a leader. And most leaders are not liked, if you really get down to the nitty-gritty of it. And you have to be hard. You have to be hard-nosed. You can't show partiality to anybody. And he kind of demanded a little respect, too. But in retrospect, he was right, totally right. I told him what a son of a bitch I thought he was when we wasn't, to his face in San Antonio, Texas, when we wasn't fighting, but what an excellent battle commander he was. And I'd have followed him anywhere. Anywhere. Had a lot of respect for him. I really did.
Who were you closest to in your company?
I was closest to a guy from near Manchester, New Hampshire. He was about 6 years older than me and treated me like a little boy, a little brother. And he had been in the Army for quite some time and had been a tech sergeant at one time and got busted back to a private. And he knew the loops and what have you of getting around. And Andy, his name was Wilfred Anderson, S-E-N, not S-O-N. And he was like a big brother to me.
Give me an example of that relationship.
Well, he'd kind of tell me when he thought I wasn't doing right. And then another fellow that from Chicago who came to the 12th shortly after I got there, I was very close to him, and especially if we were out on night tactics and whatever, because his name was Jim Hanlon, and he could not see at night. He wore very thick glasses, and he had trouble seeing at night, so we had a little rope. I had one end of it, he had the other end at night, and Jim was, this is rambling.
This is great.
Jim was with me when I got hit, and I did not see him again. He was captured. I saw him later in London at a Red Cross facility in June of 1945, and then I had no more contact with him at all until about 1992, when I get a 8x11 envelope from, said on the outside, Patricia Hanlon from Chicago. I don't know anything about anything. I opened it up and pulled it out, and the first thing I saw was a picture of me, and it was his wife. Jim died in 1975. And his wife didn't know anything about the 12th Armored Division until I think it was Mr. Glover got going with names and what have you, and she found out about it, and she sent me the picture, a little letter, and also a photocopy of wedding invitation that was sent to me in 1965 when they got married, and it was never delivered and sent back to her. And would you believe that she's right here with us at this convention? And we went to California with her. And so I've got 2 girls here with me. And Pat never married again, but she's a vivacious young lady and a grand supporter of the 12th.
That's great stuff. Tell me about Herleshheim.
Well, I didn't see much of it since I was the first one in the company to get hit, the first one that was evacuated.
Tell me about that. Where was that? How did it happen?
Well, it was out in an open field. We were about, I guess, half a mile off the Rhine River. At that particular time, I think it was about 15 tanks had been knocked out in that field that day. And it was getting on late in the afternoon, and the ground was frozen about 12 inches thick, and they decided to pull back for the day, that we wasn't going to be able to take the time because all the tanks of the 23rd, a great number of them had been knocked out. And they sent me and Jim Hanlon and Joe Torriella with a bazooka out about 100 yards in front of the company's position, and we were supposed to dig in. Now, that's a pretty hard job to dig in through 12 inches of frozen soil. And we hadn't been out there more than about 10 minutes when mortar shells started falling, and I think the third one that fell got me. I got hit right here where my fingers are. And I didn't even know if I had an arm. It was just totally. So I decided that the best thing for me to be was to go back and see what was wrong with that arm. And so that's all of Herleshheim I got to see. That was it. And went through something like a MASH hospital, and they removed the metal. Fortunately, it was right at the joint, but did not get into the joint, so I don't have any disability whatsoever from it. I was gone 33 days before I returned to the company. Returned to the company with still a bandage on my arm, and I couldn't put the rifle up here to fire. But I was back. I'm so happy to be back, because they were my family, and there was Andy. He didn't get it at Herleshheim, so I was tickled. Sergeant Camp was there, Captain Evans was there, and that's about the only people I knew. The rest of them had been killed, captured, or wounded, and was gone. I think we suffered somewhere at least two-thirds of the division in that. I mean, we were really clobbered,
When you came back, what was the morale? What was the feeling? Or did they discuss Herleshheim? Or
Oh, not much. The main thing was, I've already stated this, was, can I live this next minute? And so that was primarily what it was. But I was extremely glad to get back to with Andy and Sergeant Camp. It really was. It's a family, no question about it. And I've been asked many times by people, why are you going to Abilene? What is it out there that's attracting you? And it's a bondage that I have with these guys that I don't even know their names. I don't know the names even, but it's a bonding that's rather hard to explain, but I kind of like the old dudes, so.
Is it the fact of, do y'all use words to communicate always?
No, I don't communicate with, I occasionally will talk with Merle One. I'll occasionally talk with Pat Hanlon. I don't communicate a great deal with them. I'm too busy. I've worked with the same firm for 51 years, and I'm still on the payroll, so.
You still working, huh?
I'm still working, get a paycheck. I don't know whether you call it work or not, but.
Tell me, you were injured, y'all moved on towards, were y'all going towards, no, you were going, where
After
did you
I
go
was,
from there?
we still had not crossed the Rhine River, and while I was in the hospital, they eliminated the last enclave that the Germans had on the west side of the Rhine River in France, down what was called the Colmar Pocket. A lot of the troops referred to that as Herlisheim too. I think it was a Herlisheim in that area, a small village too. But I was in the hospital while that was going on. That was a rather major activity too that the division was in. And then the next move that we had of any significance that I recall is when Captain Ebbage came into, we were billeted into an old schoolhouse, and he arrived in about 7:30. He said, we're moving in 30 minutes, paint out all the names on 12th Armored Division, 17th, paint that out, take your shoulder patches off. We're gone. And we did leave about 8 o'clock or shortly thereafter. Rode all day. In the middle of the night, the half-track driver says, how about you driving a little bit for me? I'm tired. So I drove for about an hour, and of course it was blackout lights, and we got off a road and got on a little old dirt road and picked up speed and what have you. And so I punched him. I said, you better start driving again. So I went out the door. He moved over. I got up on the hood of the half-track, and he drove it just about as far as I'm here to the railroad off the side of the road, and it was just hanging there because a bridge down there they thought it was going to be blown, which didn't happen. So we were just left there, and the next morning I was able to get a tank retriever and a wrecker to pick the track up, set it back up on its wheels, and that's when we were transferred up into the 3rd Army for Patton. And so we took out trying to catch the company. And 4 days later we caught the company, and at that time we had 5 half-tracks from the 17th along. And we fought every day too. We fought every day and finally caught up with them when they were relatively close to the Rhine River. And we crossed the Rhine River on a pontoon bridge, and I think it's the same one that Patton stood and urinated into the Rhine on. And while we were up there, I don't recall that my squad got any food whatsoever from the 3rd Army, but we got gasoline and ammunition.
What y'all do, scrounge or?
Honey, we had enough K rations and C rations and D rations that we could have lived for 3 or 4 weeks if we had to. You have to understand that the military people were pack rats, and we had that half-track loaded. We were supposed to have on my half-track a 30 caliber water-cooled machine gun. We removed it and put it on the right side of the half-track, put a 50 caliber up into the ring mount. We acquired a 30 caliber we put on this side of the half-track. So we had 3 machine guns on the half-track. And we were well armed.
Was that something y'all just kind of rigged up or obtained?
We acquired.
You acquired, yes. I know the short word for that. Y'all acquired it.
We acquired it.
You acquired it. And then y'all just worked together to get it mounted and kept on going?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did y'all do much of the acquiring of extra stuff along the road, like houses and stuff where y'all went?
I never removed a single thing from any house that I was in because I had to think about my mother, because she would have whipped my butt when I got home if I'd have done it. No, I didn't. I did not take anything from any German house whatsoever. Now, I know others did. There's a lot of them. If you could find a Leica camera or something like that. The only thing that I acquired, which was a pistol or something like that, I looked at it as a different thing than a camera or something. But I did have a small little automatic pistol I obtained off of a German supply train that we overran, a P-38, a brand new one. I got that, and I got, somehow at the end of the war, I acquired a German rifle, and I sent it home. But those are the only three things. And also a knife with a swastika on it. And one or two things with a swastika on it, but that's the only thing that I brought home.
I hear a lot of times they'd go and get food or
Oh, we did that.
or
Oh, we did that, yes,
chickens or
yes.
things like that.
We did that, sure.
Tell me about when y'all overcame the train. You just mentioned the train.
The train had been overrun, and this is during the period that we were behind trying to catch up. And of course, we saw all this stuff was laying around, and so we may have been under fire too at that same time because we fought every day. The 12th Armored Division, basically, in my opinion, most of the time was clear the road and shoulders and go. Don't worry about what's on the side. Just pierce out and go. And that's what I remember most about it.
What did you learn about yourself in this war?
How to survive, I guess.
What characteristics do you really admire in the men that you saw?
Say that again.
The characteristics that you admire in the men that you served with?
Well, it all goes back, in my opinion, to what Mama and Daddy taught me. And that was more important to me than anything that I saw. Of course, I admired leadership, but I didn't admire some of the things that and wouldn't participate in some of the things that the other troopers may be doing. Not that I was a good boy. It was just the fact that I just didn't think some of the things were proper. And that's about it.
You probably aren't going to expand on that, are you?
No.
Okay. I could tell that. Okay, you got back to the troops. You got to the, and you missed Comar, though.
Yes.
Okay, and then when did you rejoin them?
I rejoined them at 33. That would be 15 days from 33 is going to leave you 18 to be February the 18th. I got back.
And what was it like physically for you at that point to get back in the...
Well, I was mobile entirely. I didn't... this did not impede me a great deal. It may have been too sore to feed myself for a day or two, but it was something that was... It wasn't quite $1 million wound, but it was damn close. So that's the best way I can explain it. I've read a lot of books about people that had even worse wounds than I did and continued to fight, but I wasn't one of the brave ones. If I was going to fight, I wanted to be 100%. I didn't want to be up there. Even though I went back, I didn't think I was 100%, but I'd have gone back at 50%. I would have gone back at 25%. In fact, I would have gone back immediately after them taking the medal out if I could have. And if I had been sent to some other unit, I'd have gone back to the 12th somehow. There was no way it was going to keep me from going back to 12th Armored Division.
Well, did sometimes after they were wounded, did you
Yeah.
not go back to
Yeah,
your
a
company?
few of them did. They tried as hard as they could to get you back. But occasionally they may come up when they just had to have troops here, and that's where you went. But most of the guys got back. Most of them got back.
Did you communicate the time you were in the hospital and stuff? Was there any communication? Did they know where you were at, or?
No, no. And I don't recall there was any, certainly not from B Company, in the rehab place that I was in. I don't recall of anybody else being there.
Can you talk to me about your the hospital? I've never had anybody talk to me about the MASH situations and what they did for you during your hospitalization and rehab and stuff. Do you mind going through that a little bit?
Well, it was late afternoon that I got hit, and I rode a light tank, and there was 2 stretchers on the back of it being hauled to the battalion aid station. I got to the battalion aid station, and as I recall, they put a Band-Aid type thing, a dressing over it, and put a tag onto me. And I got in the ambulance and rode to division medics. They just passed me through, didn't even look at me, and put me in another ambulance, and I wound up about midnight in an old school building, which was serving as a typical MASH hospital. They x-rayed me to determine what it was and sent me upstairs and put me on a cot, and I hadn't slept for 2 nights, and they woke me up the next morning bright early and carried me. I walked downstairs, and they helped me get off all my clothes except my pants and my boots, and put them all between my legs, and gave me a shot of penicillin, and the nurse said count 10 backwards, and I got to 7, and that's all I remember. Woke up, they woke me up later in the afternoon, said it's time for you to go to the bathroom, and the next morning they put me in an ambulance and sent me to this rehab place at Epinal, France. And 3 days after that, the doctor took the dressing off, and he said, "Oh my God, it's infected. You should be in a general hospital. And if this thing doesn't improve in a couple of days, that's where you're going." So that infection probably kept me from at least 2 weeks from getting back to the division. And so it did very, very slowly. I had recovery on it, and it was a quick trip through the MASH hospital. But I don't remember anything about it after 7.
So you get back to the 12th, and so that's going to be in February. You
Yeah,
said?
the 18th.
Okay. Tell me the journey on through Europe at that time. After that.
Well, shortly after that, Captain Ebbage, a runner, was sent, so I reported to him, and he said, "I'm going to make you squad leader of the mortar squad." I said, "Well, Captain, I've never fired one, never had any instruction on one, and that's going to be bad news. You radioing back doing something, and I may not be doing the right thing." And we had a little conversation about another trooper, which I'm not going to get into. But anyway, he wound up and actually appointed the young fella who had been having some problems, but when he got something to do, he had no more problems. Give somebody some responsibility, and sometimes they react entirely different when they're sitting and twiddling their thumbs. And about 4 or 5 days after that, again, I was called to Captain Ebbage, and he says, "You are now squad leader of the 2nd Squad," because we had a fatality with the platoon sergeant, and Andy was made platoon sergeant, and I was made squad leader of the 2nd Squad, and I was the 5th squad leader, and I had the squad longer than anybody else, because I I was the number 5, and when I got back on February the 18th, Andy was number 4. When I left on January the 16th, Sergeant Taylor was number 1. So in that 33 days that I was gone, Sergeant Taylor was lost at Hurlesheim number 1. 2 other people had been made squad leaders before Andy got it, and the attrition was rather fast. Promotions came real quick. The Germans helped a great deal on that.
What was it like, men coming, that turnover, that experience of losing? How did you deal with that? How did you men deal with that as a group and as individuals?
Well, he was just gone. What else? You know, it's just like if you're actually in an automobile accident and get hurt. Well, yeah, he's hurt. He's in the hospital or he's in a funeral home, one of the two.
What about replacements? Was there ever, was the relationships the same, or how did y'all?
Well, we tried. Most of them tried. I mean, I'm gonna have to go in a little bit.
Okay. Okay.
Because I got to go get the boss lady.
Okay.
Got 3 minutes to take.
Okay. Well, anyway, the major part is, and I have to tell this story. One of the replacements that we got in, I was squad leader, and this was the laziest white boy I've ever seen in my life. And I told him that if he was to be my shadow, and I did not want him to be more than 10 feet away from me under most any kind of conditions, because I wanted him there when I wanted him. And he thought that I would do something to him. And so we were out in front of the company moving in and taking this little town. And just as I stepped across the first rail in the railroad, they opened up with a machine gun. So I hit the dirt over in a little defile there, and because he's smart, he gets on this side because the machine gun's on that side of me. So the bullets were kicking up dirt around us, and I could hear them sailing over my head. And I looked over there to him. We could run about less than 100 feet, and we would have been out of the line of fire because it was a building that we could get by. And I said, let's go. I am sure to this date that he has the world's record for a 100-yard dash. I have never seen anybody move so fast in all my life. And I stopped when I got out of the line of fire. He didn't. So when I walked back out there toward the railroad, and they opened up again. Of course, Harold's got enough sense to we got to do something about this, you know. But anyway, they quit firing, and so we went on in and found him about 200 feet up in the town sitting on a brick wall. I said, why didn't you come back? He said, you told me to run.
Okay, we're going to have to quit now. I'm so sorry. One quick thing. If you were to leave a message for people who hear the tape, what would you tell them about war? What would you have to comment about that experience?
I'd tell them don't believe a word that he said.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I'm sorry we got started late.